Why are you being so aggressive? Oh my God, are you serious? Stop using aggressive force! She's being complicit!
Clashes with police, threats of suspension, and university presidents facing backlash from their own faculties as more and more protests take shape on college campuses across the United States. I'm Ellison Barber in for Gadi Schwartz, and this is Stay Tuned Now. Pro-Palestinian college demonstrations are not just sweeping this country, but they are starting to pop up across the world. Today, demonstrations ignited at the Paris Institute of Political Studies. That's where French President Emmanuel Macron went to school. Students there barricading the entrance to buildings. Riot police were later seen trying to break things up. And right now in the U.S., things are heating up at a lot of campuses. You were looking right now at live pictures from Denver, where it appears that police are geared up, standing opposite pro-Palestinian protesters at Oria campus. And that is just one of a number of protests that we've seen in the last 24 hours. And the list, it just keeps growing. Inside these U.S. encampments, it appears to be a mixed bag of people, with both students and off-campus protesters, people of all ethnicities and religious backgrounds, including people who identify as Christians, Muslims, and Jewish, some peacefully protesting and some not so much. This week alone, we have seen hundreds arrested or detained at these demonstrations by local police and some pretty intense clashes. The University of Southern California is now facing major backlash after canceling all main stage commencement events. It comes a week after the school canceled the valedictorian speech by a Muslim American student over what the school claimed were security concerns. NBC News correspondent David Noriega joins us now. David, let's start with what is the latest when it comes to USC's commencement?
Yeah, so USC has made a point of saying that the smaller graduation ceremonies where students from each department walk across the stage and get their diploma, those are still on. It's the main commencement event that was expected to see some 65,000 people gathering in one place. That's been canceled. As you said, this started when the university canceled the valedictorian's commencement speech after she was criticized for her pro-Palestine views. And it really came to a head on Wednesday when the university called the police on a burgeoning encampment there. This cancellation of the main commencement ceremony has many students very upset. One student texted me saying he feels this war has ripped this campus apart. We haven't heard from university administrators since that backlash, so we're hoping to get some kind of response from them soon. Allison?
And David, I know you visited an encampment at UCLA. Talk to us about what you heard and saw there. What's the conversation that's taking place in these encampments? We've heard at other universities reports of hate speech, violence, anti-Semitism. Did you see anything like that? And in terms of who was there, is it students that are involved, or are people coming from outside of the university as well?
Right. So people have shared examples of violent and anti-Semitic rhetoric at some of these protests. The ones that I've seen, the egregious ones, are mostly outside university campuses, specifically outside Columbia University. I certainly didn't see anything like that yesterday at UCLA. That said, there are people in this protest movement who pretty openly are opposed to the state of Israel as it exists and to Zionism generally. And that's something that a lot of prominent American Jewish organizations and people say is inherently anti-Semitic and inherently threatening to American Jews and to Jewish students specifically. At the same time, a lot of Jews and Jewish organizations disagree with that definition. In fact, some Jewish groups have been integral parts of the coalitions behind these protest movements. Yesterday at UCLA, I spoke to a Jewish UCLA grad student who's part of a group called Jewish Voice for Peace, who was at the encampment. He wasn't there as a visitor. He was an organizer. He was an active organizer of the encampment. And when I asked him what he feels about the fact that many people, right up to President Biden, are calling these protests anti-Semitic, this is what he said. Take a look.
I think when our collective understanding of anti-Semitism gets oriented around very valid criticism of Zionism and Israel and state violence and militarism, it leaves us woefully unprepared to deal with what is a really scary escalation of anti-Semitism.
Listen, I think what we're seeing in American culture is a struggle over the definition of anti-Semitism and over who gets to define it. And to answer your question about whether these protest encampments are students or people from the outside, it's both. I saw students and I saw people from the outside. I think it's important to point out a lot of the students are actively welcoming people from outside who are part of what they see as a larger interconnected protest movement. Allison?
NBC's David Noriega, thank you. At times, the spread of these college protests has seemed overwhelming and contagious, catching on in places like Texas now, where Governor Greg Abbott recently told public universities to revise their free speech policies. This week at the University of Texas, Austin, state troopers were called in to help handle crowds during one demonstration where a number of people were arrested. Later, Governor Abbott called for those students to be expelled. NBC News correspondent Gadi Venegas is there. Gadi, were those state troopers called back to UT? What's the response been like there?
Ellison, they did not return, and I think the university learned a lesson by seeing how things change when the state troopers arrive. The president and university authorities have been criticized because of that decision. It was also the way they came in riot gear on horses. It was very aggressive, and that led to a standoff between the protesters and authorities. Now, before that standoff had began, or before the walkout began on Wednesday, the university did tell the organizers not to move forward with the event, saying that they would violate university rules. But there's been a lot of chat between students and members of the faculty asking what rules would have been violated with the walkout. So the university insists, saying that they had clear indication that the organizers were following patterns they've seen in other parts of the country, and that's why they had decided to bring out the state troopers. But what we saw the following day was another walkout with the same number of students out here, joined by faculty members, but no state troopers. Campus police was present, watching at a distance, and what we ended up having was a large protest without violence, with the authorities watching just from a distance. Ellison?
And Gadi, I know you've been speaking to students on campus there. What have they been telling you?
So a lot of the students that arrived on the second day, the walkout we had yesterday, were very upset because of the presence of authorities, specifically the state troopers. So they felt like they had to come out here and voice their opinions. We also saw a lot of members of the faculty come out and support the students. And as I've been having these conversations, we've seen most of the protesters here in support of Palestine, but we've also seen Jewish students with Israeli flags in support of Israel protesting side to side, and many times having conversations. Today we met students from an organization that is made up by Arab and Jewish students, and what they tell me they want to do is create more dialogue between the two groups to try to have more or better understanding. I asked one of them to point out the positive things and the way they've been able to find common ground about with both groups, and this is what he had to say.
Other than having amazing beards and obviously sharing a lot of cultural touchstones, we come from the same land. There may not be an objective truth, but there's a truth that we can have a consensus with and that we can agree on. And we understand that we all share the same roots, that we're all brothers, and that's what's important.
And this is also one of the things that was pointed out by one of the professors I spoke with who was organizing the protest. She asked for more dialogue. She asked for the university to create spaces and events where both groups with different opinions can join and have conversations. So there's a lot of things happening in different universities. Here at UT, we did go from a violent confrontation between authorities and students to a second walkout to a protest that was quite peaceful with a lot of dialogue. So very different from what we've seen in other universities this week, Allison.
Yeah, you mentioned other universities. I do want to ask you about what's happening at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. In recent days, we have seen videos of protesters of professors getting arrested during these protests. I want to let viewers see some of it, and then you and I can talk right after.
Can you call the philosophy department office and tell them I've been arrested?
Philosophy department?
Yes, call the philosophy department office.
I will.
Is there concern, Gadi, amongst faculty members, be it at Emory University or elsewhere, that it is becoming more difficult, or it has become more difficult, to preserve academic freedoms at these institutions since the October 7th terror attack in Israel?
Ellison, it is very concerning to a lot of the members of the faculty I've been speaking to, right? So when faculty members at different universities and students see these videos of what's happening in other parts of the country, they tell me it only motivates them to come out and protest. So every university has to handle these situations independently, but every university has to answer to the students and the faculty staff. Here, I can tell you that the Faculty Council sent a letter to the president asking them for an explanation for the use of the state troopers and the way they handled that first walkout. And that'll be the same case at other universities because, again, the university is formed by the staff and also by the students. Ellison?
Quad Venegas in Texas. Excellent reporting. Thank you. We are also following reports of dangerous tornadoes tonight, threatening millions across the Great Plains and the Midwest. This tornado in Nebraska is just one of several reported today across the state. One collapsed building in Lancaster County left 3 people hurt, and passengers in Omaha's airport were taken to storm shelters. In Texas, this Ring camera showing how intense winds got during a storm in that state, leading to scenes like this one. A whole 18-wheeler thrown on its side after a possible tornado passed through. And take a look at the significant damage left behind in Oklahoma. Entire buildings destroyed and power lines and trees ripped down. Now millions stretching from northern Texas to Michigan are bracing for worse conditions as tomorrow is forecasted to be the most volatile days of this multi-day storm event. NBC News meteorologist Michelle Grossman is joining me now in studio. So Michelle, talk to us about what conditions are looking right now. We mentioned this is going to get worse.
Yeah, it's tough right now. We had a tough day. Large tornadoes, destructive, bringing down buildings, houses, like you said, flipping over semis. Let's take a look at some video that we saw earlier, because some of these images you cannot wrap your head around. It almost looks like it's out of a movie. Just huge tornadoes bringing up debris. Again, we have a lot of destruction out there. It's going to take a while throughout the state of Nebraska for them to do the surveys, but a lot of them are confirmed. We could see EF4 tornadoes. Don't quote me on that, but I think that that's what we're going to see as we have the National Weather Service go in and take a look at it. Let's take a look at Dallas, too, because we saw the storms there earlier, and it just shows you how quickly these storms move in, right? You go from clear skies to these gray skies. Look how fast those winds are moving. You can see that with the clouds, right? So when you have those winds kind of twisting, that's when you get that tornadic activity. And in fact, that's what we're looking at right now. So let's go ahead and take a look at radar, because we are looking at a large storm system and a very powerful one. Still stretching from portions of Nebraska and Iowa down to Texas, clear to see where this front is. And we still have so many warnings and watches out there at this hour. So where you see the pink here, that is a tornado watch. So we have them dotting the line here all the way to Dallas. We have tornado warnings, large destructive tornadoes still moving through the state of Iowa. This is where the cluster of storms are the toughest right now, and they will continue to move off to the north and also the east. Then we go down to the south. We have severe thunderstorm warnings. Where you see this pink here, that's probably hail falling, and we could be seeing hail up to 2 inches in some spots. Really heavy rain. This is going to be a problem over the next day or two, because we're seeing these storms going over the same area. And then we have a second storm moving in tomorrow. It's not going to be the same system. That's going to move out. We're going to see another system moving in, and that's going to bring the chance for more severe weather tomorrow. But again, we're seeing that cluster of storms all throughout the Midwest, the Central Plains, into the Southern Plains. 21 million people still at risk through tonight, because we're looking at the chance for more damaging hail, a few strong tornadoes. We could see over EF2 or greater. Winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour. That's going to bring some power outages out, and it's going to continue to bring some trees down. So Omaha, Kansas City, all the way down to Waco. We could still see some storms, but we're moving this off to the east as we go throughout the nighttime hours. This number grows tomorrow. So this is Saturday. I know a lot of people aren't paying attention to the news. We're not paying attention to the weather. But if you live in these areas, you need a tornado plan. You need to heed the warnings. Get to the lowest level of your house. If you don't have a basement, still get to that lowest level, but get to an interior room like a bathroom or a closet, because we're still looking at the chance for really strong storms tomorrow. Really large hail, once again, 2 inches or greater. That's about tennis ball size hail. Then we're looking at a few strong tornadoes possible, winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour, Kansas City, Wichita, Oklahoma City, down to Abilene. And then again on Sunday, Ellison, we're looking at the chance for more severe storms.
All right. NBC News meteorologist Michelle Grossman, thank you.
Sure.
The first week of testimony in Donald Trump's hush money trial wrapped up in Manhattan today. Former National Enquirer publisher David Pecker, the first witness called in the trial, testified for a fourth day, and two new witnesses also took the stand, including Trump's former assistant and a banker. NBC News correspondent Dasha Byrne has this report.
So, Ellison, the main focus of the day was the cross-examination of David Pecker by Trump's defense attorneys. They were trying to undercut him in a couple of ways. Number one, trying to poke holes in his story, trying to show that he has issues with memory, potentially issues with truthfulness, so going at him from that angle. And number two, they were trying to paint a picture of all of what Pecker did with Cohen and Trump as standard operating procedure for the National Enquirer, that there wasn't anything particularly unusual, that the National Enquirer frequently participated in catch and kill schemes for other celebrities, leveraged stories with celebrities for other kinds of scoops, that this wasn't a particularly novel or unusual situation that they had with former President Trump. But then, when you had the prosecutor once again come and question Pecker, he reestablished that while he may have had similar arrangements with other celebrities, and the National Enquirer did kind of operate this way, he did not do this for any other candidate for president, and that was the distinction. And had Pecker once again confirm that this was an effort to suppress this information for the purpose of influencing the election. So again, that is at the heart of this case here. Then toward the end of the day, we had two other witnesses come up to the stand. First, it was Rona Graff, former President Trump's former assistant of 34 years. She was sort of the gatekeeper, kept his calendar, kept his contacts, kept his emails, and she was able to testify that both Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels were in Trump's contacts. She testified to seeing Stormy Daniels at Trump Tower at one point. Now, the second witness, Gary Farrow, was Michael Cohen's former banker, and he allegedly helped set up the home equity line of credit through which Cohen paid Daniels, a third witness, to testify. Now, those second two, we get into a little bit of the minutia of just exactly how money went from whom to when, how Trump's schedule operated. But the big picture that prosecutors have been trying to paint is that Trump knew exactly what he was doing, that he was an involved businessman. That's something that Pecker's testimony really helped the prosecution to solidify, and that this was something he entered into with full knowledge of what he was doing and what the purpose was of this catch and kill scheme, especially when it came to the Stormy Daniels story. Ellison?
Dasha Burns, thank you. Don't go anywhere, because we are just getting started. Up next, an arrest at the airport in connection to an explosion in Michigan. We'll have details on who cops have charged. Plus, the story of how doctors saved a grandmother's life with a pig's kidney. Dr. Ven Gupta will explain how they did it. And later this hour, this kid's love of seagulls is taking Europe by storm. We're going to introduce you to him during your 60 Seconds of Joy, so stay tuned. Welcome back. More on the charges connected to a house explosion in a moment. But first, here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. President Joe Biden was on Howard Stern's radio show today. It was a rare live interview with the president that focused heavily on biographical details. But one big headline from the one-on-one, President Biden said he is willing to debate Donald Trump ahead of the election. Trump has been calling for a debate, but in the past, when the question's been brought up to the Biden campaign, they've avoided committing to one. One of the paramedics connected to Elijah McClain's death was sentenced to 4 years of probation today. Jeremy Cooper was convicted of criminally negligent homicide last year. Elijah McClain was killed in 2019 after a police stop where he was put in a neck hold and injected with ketamine. Britain's King Charles is planning to resume his public duties next week. It comes as the palace says he's making good progress with his treatment. He was diagnosed with a still unnamed type of cancer 3 months ago. Scientists are considering a Category 6 for mega hurricanes. The current scale works on a 5-category system. Because of warming temperatures, hurricanes are becoming more intense with stronger winds and heavier rain. The calls to expand the scale came after a number of storms passed the Category 5 wind speeds. Model Giselle Bündchen broke down in tears after she was pulled over in a traffic stop. Bündchen apparently told the officer she was trying to escape paparazzis. She was stopped earlier this week in Surfside, California. Bündchen began crying, telling the officer that she felt she was being stalked. In Ohio, police have released body camera footage showing a confrontation between a man being restrained by officers who later died. The video shows police responding to the scene of a single car crash last week and the tussle that followed. NBC News correspondent Blaine Alexander has this report.
Well, Ellison, the body camera video that was released by Canton Police is about 35 minutes long or so, and it actually the whole thing starts with a 911 call from a neighbor, somebody who lives close to the bar. He says that he heard a loud crash outside of his home, and the beginning of the body camera that you see from police is that they arrive on scene and see this telephone pole that's kind of just smashed in half in the middle of the street. Police in a statement later say that Mr. Tyson ran his car into that pole and then got out and ran into the bar on foot. Well, after that, we get a couple more 911 calls from inside the bar, people basically saying that this man is inside, he's disturbing our patrons. What we see in the video is officers going inside, confronting Tyson, and then struggling to get him into custody. Ultimately, they're able to get him on his stomach, handcuff him behind his back, and for a period, you see an officer with his knee on Mr. Tyson's back. Now, one thing that's drawing a lot of criticism is this 5-minute period or so between when he says he can't breathe and when an officer ultimately checks for a pulse. During that time, you can kind of hear some of the officers talking with some of the patrons, at one point even making a joke. Here's a little bit from that body camera video. Take a look.
Only for a good tussle.
I've always wanted to be in a bar fight. I don't know if this counts.
Hey, chalk it up. Yeah, chalk it up, man.
Now, the Canton Police Department says that both of the officers involved have been placed on paid administrative leave. There's an investigation going on right now. The mayor says that he's met with the Tyson family and he's promising transparency in all of this. But for so many people in the community there, that's not necessarily enough. I spoke with the president of the NAACP, Reverend McDaniel, who tells me that this really just kind of underscores a deep distrust that so many people that he's spoken to have with police. And he says that he's very concerned about, one, training and also transparency. He does, however, commend them for releasing the body camera, he says, within about a week of that incident. But he still says that it's necessary to make some very big changes after watching what he saw in that video. Ellison.
Now to a development in last month's massive warehouse explosion in Michigan. The owner of the Detroit business, which caught fire and exploded, was arrested last weekend in New York trying to use a one-way ticket to Hong Kong. Norkestu was brought back to Michigan earlier this week and was arraigned for an involuntary manslaughter charge yesterday. The March 4th explosion killed a man who was about a quarter of a mile away at the time at a car wash. He was hit by a canister that was sent flying through the air because of the explosion. Let's bring in NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson for more. So, Steve, remind us again, what was this case about and what caused that explosion to begin with?
Yeah, you'll remember this explosion now about a month ago or so. The video is devastating. It is raining down debris from this explosion site at an office park for miles, killing that 19-year-old man you just mentioned. The cause, of course, still under investigation. More specifically, what was the ignition point, the trigger to cause the spark to start the explosion in the first place? That's being worked on right now in a sprawling investigation by the ATF, EPA, local police, a lot of agencies kind of coming together to figure out what exactly started the explosion in the first place. They're doing it by way of looking at what the catalysts were to the explosions. In other words, you have this office park, which, as far as we know, is zoned for commercial and retail use, not necessarily as a storage facility. And yet officials are finding on site cans of butane, cans of nitrous oxide, lithium batteries, all things that are triggers, of course, extremely highly flammable, which may have led to this explosion. Beyond that, they're now looking for somebody to blame. Of course, when you have these materials in a place that is not necessarily zoned to hold these materials, you look at the owner, leading to police making this announcement earlier this week. Listen to this.
Due to the evidence presented, to authorize an arrest warrant for one count of involuntary manslaughter for Mr. Castell, which is a felony that carries a punishment of up to 15 years.
And of course, now we know that he bought that one-way ticket to Hong Kong. The Port Authority in New York stopped him. He's been exported back to Michigan, where he awaits what happens next in court. Allison?
Yeah, I mean, Steve, to most people, they will look at this and say, okay, Noor Kestu is the business owner. He's trying to get on a plane to go out of the country with no return expected. That seems suspicious. Do we know what his motives might have been? I mean, have we heard from his attorneys, or have police said why they think he was trying to leave?
Attorneys have been mostly mute on this. Investigators, I think, are wondering the same thing because, as they've said, Ketu has a wife and a child here in the United States. So they're not necessarily sure if he was trying to disappear entirely. Of course, seemingly, when you buy a one-way ticket, it would seem that way. But all of this, of course, speculation at this point. I'm sure he's feeling some guilt about this massive explosion that has happened in that community. Allison?
All right, a lot to watch moving forward. Steve Patterson, thank you. Coming up, forget age. A 60-year-old woman just made history after being crowned Miss Universe Buenos Aires. But first, you have to see this. A family in Utah has finally reunited with their cat after it went mysteriously missing a couple of weeks ago. Last week, the family was relieved to discover the cat, which is named Galena, she was located in California via microchip. As for how the kitty got there, we'll get this. The family accidentally shipped their cat off in an Amazon return. The cat was trapped for 6 days inside of a box alongside boots before she was discovered by an Amazon warehouse employee. The family says Galena is doing just fine. We will be right back. Welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world. The Pentagon says U.S. troops have started to build a pier off the coast of Gaza to help deliver humanitarian aid. These satellite photos show where the pier will be built near that square of land. The Pentagon says they're also planning to build a causeway so trucks can easily access the pier. It's expected to be up and running by May. Initially, 90 trucks of aid will be delivered from the pier each day, but ultimately they plan to move that number to 150 trucks per day. That would reportedly be enough to provide as many as 2 million meals per day to Gazans. At least 200 people were killed across East Africa in the last few days due to torrential rain and flooding. The extreme rains unleashed a wave of destruction across Kenya, Tanzania, and Burundi, flooding homes, leveling businesses, and leaving people stranded. Here's how one Kenyan resident described it.
It was really terrible. Me and my daughters and my wife and my brother were on top of roof. Yeah, you can imagine. From morning till 11 p.m.
The floods have also killed thousands of livestock, destroyed tens of thousands of acres of crops, and damaged roads. More than 200,000 people have been displaced across the three countries. Yesterday, Ariel Henry officially resigned as Prime Minister of Haiti. Henry's remaining cabinet chose Michael Patrick Boisvert to serve as the interim Prime Minister. Meanwhile, a transitional council has been tasked with naming a new Prime Minister and cabinet by 2026. Haitians have been without an elected government since the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse in 2021. An Argentinian woman is making history by becoming the first 60-year-old contestant to win Miss Universe Buenos Aires. Alejandra Rodriguez is a lawyer and a journalist. She's the first 60-year-old to win such a prestigious beauty pageant, and she is inspiring women around the world to defy social expectations. Rodriguez says her win represents a new paradigm in beauty pageants where women are not judged solely on physical beauty, but on their values as well. She'll now compete for Miss Universe Argentina and move one step closer to a possible Miss Universe title. And tonight, a renewed effort to secure that long-awaited ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas, with Egypt sending mediators to Tel Aviv to help jumpstart those negotiations. NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez has more.
An Israeli official tells NBC News that a delegation of Egyptian mediators are here in Tel Aviv today, and they are carrying with them a proposal designed to jumpstart these long-stalled ceasefire negotiations. Now, a previous proposal had suggested a 6-week ceasefire in Gaza in exchange for the release of 40 hostages from the so-called humanitarian category. So that is women, children, the elderly, people with serious medical conditions. Hamas has indicated that it does not have 40 living hostages who fit that criteria. So the Egyptians today are suggesting a new formula that would involve the release of 33 hostages from that category. Israel's cabinet is studying that proposal. No final decision has been made yet, but it comes after months and months of deadlock. Israel is continuing to threaten to move ahead with its ground offensive in the city of Rafah. We have seen intensive bombing there over the last week, but as of yet, no sign of large-scale Israeli ground forces closing in on the city. The White House has said it opposes any Israeli operation in Rafah without a credible plan to move those million-plus Palestinian civilians out of harm's way. Raf Sanchez, NBC News, Tel Aviv.
As tensions continue to escalate between the U.S. and China over things like Taiwan and TikTok, it appears that new tensions are emerging. Sky News correspondent Nicole Johnston has more on why the U.S. has called Chinese electric vehicles a, quote, existential threat to the American auto industry.
A factory of the future, China's ambitious bet is on green technology. Rolling out to the world electric vehicles. This year, one of its budding brands, Zeekr, is doubling production. Globally, the scale is staggering.
China is currently the biggest automotive market in the world. Although there are many new brands, I think the global market is big enough for them all. I don't think there's anything to worry about.
But others disagree. Europe is investigating slapping tariffs on Chinese EVs. The US has called them an existential threat to America's auto industry.
These cars are causing growing trade tension between China on one side and the US and Europe on the other. China is accused of flooding the global market, and companies in the West are worried they can't compete.
Walking a fine line is Europe's biggest car manufacturer, Germany.
Do you agree with the EU and US position that China is dumping cheap green technology products on the global market?
It's clear that we have to talk about questions of overcapacity and that we have to talk about subsidy competition. That's why it's important that we establish rules that prevent everyone from continuing as they wish.
Rules or no rules, China is forging ahead. With more charging stations than anywhere else on the planet.
Chinese-made cars are good enough for us ordinary Chinese. If you're thinking of buying one, there's no need to go for a Mercedes or a German EV.
Electric vehicles, solar panels and batteries, all part of President Xi Jinping's plan to overhaul China's debt-driven economy, creating cars at cutthroat prices. Competitors are watching nervously.
Still to come, doctors just successfully transplanted a pig kidney into a human patient who was close to dying. We have those incredible details next, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Here are some of the stories happening out west that we're following. A massive pier fire in Oceanside, California is now contained. Fire crews fought the blaze throughout the night, letting it burn in hard-to-reach areas. Here's what it looked like yesterday. Amazingly, firefighters were able to save about 90% of the pier. The fire's origin was pinpointed to a vacant diner, but there's still no word on the exact cause of the blaze. Over to nearby La Jolla, where fragments of a heavily decomposed whale washed ashore. Scientists say the carcass belonged to a gray whale. That species is currently migrating north. The remains were eventually cleaned up from the beach. And the CDC has announced the first ever string of HIV infections to come from cosmetic injections. They were reported at an unlicensed spa in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The infections are being linked to non-sterile practices during vampire facials. Those are cosmetic procedures where your own blood is injected back into your face, supposedly to improve skin health. According to the CDC, at least 3 people with no known risk factors for HIV were infected with it at the now closed spa. One of them found out that she was infected when she was hospitalized with severe symptoms. The owner of that spa, she pled guilty to 5 felony counts of practicing medicine without a license back in 2022 and was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. Today is Arbor Day, the annual tradition of planting trees. The United States has celebrated it since 1872. Over the past year, massive wildfires from Texas to Hawaii have highlighted the importance of planting trees to restore our nation's forests. NBC News national climate reporter Chase Kane introduces us to a company that's turning to Wall Street to fund that mission.
Imagine yourself here 3.5 years ago. You'd be standing under the canopy of a mature forest.
As a professional forester, Lisa loves seeing new life return to this land, but aches thinking about the North Complex fire, which scorched more than 300,000 acres.
And at the height of its fury, it burned through 1,000 acres every 30 minutes.
A buildup of brush and conditions amplified by climate change fueled one of the biggest fires in California history.
When a wildfire burns this intensely, it's not just killing the forest right now, it's also killing the forest's future, because the cones, the seeds, which would help this forest grow back on its own, they get incinerated in the fire.
This is why it's necessary to step in and replant intentionally, as well as being intentional about climate change.
Lisa works for Mass Reforestation, a unique company helping landowners recover after devastating fire. They're a one-stop shop with experts who collect seeds, grow them into seedlings to replant, and then they pay for it by recruiting investors, climate investors.
Projects like this are expensive. The only way that gets funded is through this voluntary flow of funds into the carbon space.
Xander's talking about voluntary carbon credits. To keep it simple, a company pledges to be net zero. So while they're cutting emissions, they invest in things like this, replanting a forest. And then as that forest grows, it absorbs carbon dioxide, offsetting their emissions.
The financial markets haven't really engaged with carbon finance in the way that they could. That capital then gets unlocked, and then we're really talking about millions or tens of millions of acres, which is the scale that we need to operate at in order to address climate change.
Carbon streaming sourced the money for the 3 families who own this land to restore the forest. And in exchange, the land will be permanently preserved.
If we had tried to do that on our own, we would have gotten lost at the first turn. Like, it makes it all possible in a way that's this incredible win-win. We're doing it for future generations. We're doing it for our kids.
I think about the legacy I leave, in which we actually hear this wind that's coming up over the ridge, and we hear it through the needles of those pines. There's a certain way that it sings through the needles, and it sounds so wonderful and refreshing. And that will happen here on this site in 20 years.
In California, I'm national climate reporter Chase Kane.
Remember last month when a man in Massachusetts became the first person ever to successfully receive a genetically modified pig kidney transplant? Well, a grandmother in New Jersey may have just topped that. Earlier this month, doctors here in New York, they helped 54-year-old Lisa Pinasso receive a mechanical heart pump and just days later, a pig kidney transplant. The back-to-back surgeries were essential for this patient who said she was on the brink of death since she did not qualify for a traditional transplant.
I want to spend time with my grandkids, do stuff with them, run around with a dog. So I just took a chance, and worst case scenario, if it didn't work for me, it might have worked for someone else. And it could have helped the next person or the next person.
Pisano now making history as the second person to receive a pig kidney transplant, but the first patient ever with a heart pump. 62-year-old Richard Slayman received his pig kidney last month at Massachusetts General Hospital, and he was discharged after just 2 weeks. NBC News medical contributor Dr. Ven Gupta joins us now with more. Dr. Gupta, talk to us about this. Pisano, she had 2 back-to-back surgeries, one of which was a pig kidney transplant, right? Talk to us about how unprecedented this really is.
Well, Ellison, good evening. This really has something we've been talking about for about 30 years, but now we've seen just in the last few years, since 2022, a few examples. Specifically here in 2024, actually in living human beings. In earlier years, it was in folks that unfortunately were brain dead to see if it even functioned. Now we're actually seeing that this is working in human beings. They're able to actually have organ function, and this is opening up a new set of possibilities for a field that frankly has not had enough organs for the need that exists out there.
Yeah, talk to us about that need of more organs, because when we're talking about this patient specifically, she was ineligible to receive a human organ. Why would that be the case? And if this procedure does prove to be successful in the weeks and months ahead, will it help her health long term?
Unfortunately, in this case, she was too severely ill. And the feeling was that you have to look at somebody's ability to withstand organ transplantation and will, with a human kidney, and will they get maximal benefit? And so we think about things like life expectancy. The fact is, unfortunately, Ellison, only about 20% of people who have, say, in this case, kidney failure, receive a kidney transplant every given year. That's 80% of people, over 100,000 people who don't get a kidney. This is going to be the future. This is called xenotransplantation, animal to human transplantation, in this case of a kidney. This is going to be the future. And you saw she got not just the kidney, but she got something called the thymus gland from the pig as well, which produces immune cells, actually helps the human being, in this case, this woman, tolerate what is a foreign kidney from an animal so that she doesn't reject it. So that was the interesting aspect here. Not only just getting the kidney, making sure it works, but making sure she receives it and doesn't reject it.
When you talk about this idea of this being the future, animal to human transplants, and possibly it helping to narrow that gap of people who need a transplant, but there aren't enough human organs for them, how soon do you think we could see this more widely implemented?
This is about research. This is about making sure that we understand how do we have to genetically modify these organs so that they're well tolerated by human beings. I suspect this is going to give momentum for kidney transplantation. There was some gene knockouts, gene modifications that allow these kidneys, both in Boston and now here in New York, to be well tolerated. We're going to see how these patients do. But Ellison, in the next 3 years, we can see this potentially take off, especially for kidney transplantation, the area of greatest need. And then before long, heart, liver, some of the other key areas of need here in the near distant horizon.
Wow, amazing stuff. Dr. Ven Gupta, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Before we go, when this Walmart deli employee is not working, he is training to be on the Olympic team. We have the story of Dylan Beard's incredible run. That's next, so stay tuned. Tonight, in the future of everything, we've all heard the phrase reduce, reuse, recycle. But some materials are harder to break down than others, like those foam coffee cups or packing peanuts that come in your deliveries. NBC News Daily anchors and Clay Esimwa explains how one company is changing that.
A lot of material ends up in our landfills. Some is biodegradable, but other waste is not so easily disposed of, like polystyrene foam. Recycling polystyrene foam is controversial. In fact, there are bans or restrictions on the sale or distribution of the material across the country. Here in Monroe Township, New Jersey, one company is reinventing how the product is recycled and reused.
So the first step is we have a densifier, which takes the foam, puts it in, it chips it up, it melts it through a warming tube, and then it comes out through the densifier.
Multiple companies recycle foam. Foam Cycle is one of them, partnering with municipalities across the country, turning lightweight polystyrene into a heavy and dense product.
Pick up one ingot.
Let's see. Okay, yeah, that's not light. About how heavy is this?
About 40 pounds.
40 pounds, okay.
The ingots go to a recycling center.
Yes.
And they chip it up into these pellets. They're able to make any kind of molding boards.
Foam Cycle says they recycled over 180,000 pounds of foam nationally in 2021 with their patented technology. Translation, around 145,000 cubic feet diverted from a landfill. What kind of foam do you take?
We take the packing polystyrene, not the more rubbery foam.
Regardless of type, polystyrene is notoriously difficult to recycle.
Styrofoam in the environment is a big concern. Number one, it's hard to recycle. Number two, those little pieces of styrofoam, can get out on our beaches, go into our waterways.
Do you think a material like polystyrene should be created or used at all?
Polystyrene definitely has its uses, right? So it's used in insulation. I'm sure the lightweight aspects of it is very important. But when we're just going to the coffee shop, the grocery store, it just gets to be too much.
It's a sentiment echoed nationally. Quick history lesson. In 2019, Maine became the first state to pass a ban on polystyrene foam.
Maine now has a law banning the use of styrofoam food and drink containers.
New York State following suit in 2020, banning single-use food and drink containers, as well as what's commonly known as packing peanuts.
Littering our streets, waterways, catch basins, and neighborhood sidewalks.
With other states and Washington, D.C. implementing their own bans or restrictions on the material. Still, Foam Cycle says the need for their service will remain so long as there's polystyrene.
I hear there's someone you want me to meet.
You have to meet Buster Foam.
Okay.
He's our mascot. He's going to tell everyone to bring it to the recycling drop-off center.
Because we can't take it to the curbside.
That's correct. You got to bring it to your recycling drop-off center.
Can I meet Buster?
Yes, come meet Buster.
Okay. I'm
Buster,
a little scared.
Come on out, Buster.
Wow.
There he is,
Hi.
Buster Foam.
Hi, Buster Foam.
What's your message to consumers who are struggling in the recycling space?
Calm down, be serene. It's all good. Be mindful. So do we need that package? Do we need that product? Think about its end of life.
And that's foam recycling, simply explained.
And as we count down the days of the Paris Olympics, one North Carolina man is hurtling towards making the Olympic track and field team. He's not your typical Olympic hopeful. While he grinds on the track, he's also grinding for hours at his day job at Walmart. From the deli line to the finish line, Today Show co-anchor Craig Melvin has his amazing story.
When hurdler Dylan Beard showed up at the Millrose Games in New York City in February, he was not expected to win.
Where are you? I'm to the right of you.
You're not even on the screen. And as Dylan blew past the competition, boom. The announcer didn't even seem to know his name.
Is that Dylan Beard?
Oh, but they know it now.
And indeed, he now is confirmed.
When the flower girl approaches you, you looked a little confused.
Yeah.
You were like, are these flowers for me?
Yeah, flowers are for the winner, so I'm still looking for the time, not knowing the results or anything.
25-year-old Dylan Beard has been running over hurdles since he was a teenager in Baltimore, Maryland. His high school hallway at Archbishop Spalding is still filled with his unbroken records. Did you feel the same way that you usually feel before a meet, or did you feel any different?
I think I went in a lot more relaxed, like nothing to lose, a lot to gain.
What he gained was everything. Dylan didn't just win the race, he broke records and became the third fastest hurdler in the world, punching his ticket to the U.S. Olympic track and field trials in June. What did you do, after the race?
Flew home, and the next day I was back to weight training, back to practicing, and back to work.
Here's my favorite part of your story. You're training. You've been grinding for years, but you've got a full-time job. You work at Walmart.
Yes, I do.
What do you do at Walmart?
I work in the deli section at Walmart as an associate.
Dylan is what they call an unsponsored athlete. His dream of going to the Olympics is funded only by his own sheer grit and his weekly paycheck.
Set.
By day, he trains tirelessly at North Carolina State University in Raleigh, North Carolina. His coach, Ruben McCoy, says Dylan is unlike any athlete he's ever worked with.
His work ethic is very much unmatched, and his character speaks very highly of the man who he is.
And by night, he's behind the counter at Walmart slicing deli meat.
Small or large?
Small.
And waiting on customers.
Thank you and have a great day.
You too, thanks.
Hey, what's up, bro?
What's up?
His manager, David Davis, tells us Dylan is one of the most dependable employees they've ever had.
Dylan's work ethic is next level. He provides excellent customer service all the time. He goes above and beyond just like he does on the track.
And just as he did throughout his education, Dylan just completed his master's degree in public health at Howard University, which he hopes to use counseling at-risk youth. We saw you doing some training, and we saw you working at Walmart as well. It seems as if you take both of them equally serious.
Oh, absolutely.
What drives you?
At the end of the day, my name is attached to what I'm doing. So yes, I'm working at Walmart in the deli, but it still represents me, which represents a lot of other people.
Come on, y'all, come on in. We soon learn where Dylan gets that positivity from.
This is my mom.
When his friends and family, even former coaches, track coach?
Yeah, high school track coach, yes.
Oh, my goodness. Heard he was in town, they showed up. They all showed up.
You know these people. I know all of them. This is Dad right here.
Nice to meet you. And this is Granddad.
Yep, that's Grandpa.
That's the old man here. You got a good cheer squad here. A lot of folks love Dylan. And Dylan would love to take that whole cheer squad with him all the way to Eugene, Oregon for the Olympic trials. But Dylan's squad runs deep. Thanks to our friends at Walmart, I have decided to give you $20,000. We want all these folks to be able to go cheer you on. Dylan, clearly moved, needed a moment to collect his thoughts.
I'm appreciative, very unexpected, and I'm thankful. Very thankful. Thank you.
We're proud of you, man. I'm proud of you. And now, Dylan will have this team at his side at the Olympic trials when he hopes to join an additional Team USA.
Our thanks to Craig for that, and we will be cheering for Dylan. Finally tonight, one 9-year-old English boy is capturing the hearts and French fries across the internet. Yet we are talking about Seagull Boy. The adorable kid won the screeching competition. You heard that right, the screeching competition in Belgium, and you gotta hear his screech. Here's your 60 seconds of joy.
3, 2, 1.
So Spider-Man got bit by a spider, and then he turned into Spider-Man. And I got bit by a seagull, and now I am Seagull Boy.
Oké, dames en heren, dat waren al de jonge kinderen die waren stoppen.
If it makes you happy, it makes us happy. That does it for us tonight. I'm Ellison Barber. We will see you Monday, but until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.